It's lovely to be here, and yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy this. I think the New Irish Salon obviously is a really interesting little moment in Irish exhibition history, but maybe one that people haven't heard of and aren't familiar with, and there's reasons for that which we'll get into. So the exhibition was announced in March 1923 in the Irish Times, who said that the exhibition would shortly open at the Mills Hall on Marion Row, and advised that it was an exceptional opportunity to form an opinion as to the merits of the work of the modern school, and really emphasised that the exhibition foregrounded the work of the younger generation of Irish artists. So the exhibition had about 150 paintings by 60 artists, and it was organised by a man called John Crampton Walker. And this is just a little illustration of him here from one of the exhibition articles. Crampton Walker was born in Dublin on Gardiner's Place. His father was a barrister, and he was educated in Trinity and at the Metropolitan School of Art. He was really active both as a painter, but more importantly as an organiser in Dublin and in Ireland more broadly through that kind of crucial part of the early part of the 20th century. So he's involved in founding the Black and White Artists Society. He's a member of the RHA. He was a landscape and flower painter. Again, he's not well known. His work, I suppose, is very pastoral, quite traditional, but very beautiful as well. But it was through organising exhibitions, I think, that he made his kind of biggest contribution to Irish art. It was not a great time to be starting to run exhibitions in Dublin. When the first New Irish Salon opened in 1923, the Civil War was still ongoing. There was a number of other exhibition societies still quite active despite the upheaval. So there was competition. There was the Dublin Sketching Club, the Watercolour Society of Ireland, and of course the Society of Dublin Painters as well. The main exhibition kind of society, the Royal Hibernian Academy, was homeless for all intents and purposes with the loss of their Abbey Street home in 1916. If you don't know, if you're looking at that image, the building with the kind of four pedimented windows, it's now the CIE office. You can still, and it's a spar on the ground floor on Abbey Street, but that's where the Academy had been. They had no permanent home in 1923, and their usual spring exhibition was actually held in the RDS in August as part of the horse show. So despite all of this, Crampton Walker opened the New Irish Salon, as I say, on Mills Hall on Marion Row, so very close to where we are now. This is an old photograph, but where the X is, that is roughly where the Mills Hall was. So again, just down the road from where we are today. 6 exhibitions were held as part of the New Irish Salon between 1923 and 1928. There aren't very many photographs of the Mills Hall, of what the interior, I have no idea what the layout was. Was it the ground floor? Was it an upper story? But everyone exhibited there. So Yeats exhibited there. It was a very long-standing exhibition venue. It also held dances and meetings and political meetings, so I think you could just hire it and put up really whatever you wanted there. We have 4 catalogues surviving for the New Irish Salon from 1924, 1925, 1927 and 1928, and these are in the National Library of Ireland, but these are really the only archival sources, along with contemporary press clippings and some scanned provenance notes, that we have for the exhibitions themselves. No pictures, no photographs, nothing glossy, just a list of artists and a list of works, which can be really confusing, as we'll see in a few moments. This is one of the few kind of quite legible photographs of the interior. So you can see it was very much a salon hang, stacked up floor to ceiling paintings. This is Crampton Walker. One thing that he did, which was quite unusual, was using white mounts, particularly for works on paper. You can see them there behind him, and this was often commented on as quite an unusual thing in Dublin at the time, and people were very complimentary about how the works looked. You have a real mix of styles and subjects in the exhibition. So we know In the inaugural exhibition, we've quite a kind of, the kind of national school was represented through works by Lily Williams. She exhibited Girl in National Dress, and I think it's probably this pastel, Hibernia, which was sold through Adams and is now in the O'Brien collection. She also exhibited her portrait of Arthur Griffith. It was lent to the exhibition by Griffith's widow, Maud, but it subsequently entered the collection in the Hugh Lane at a later date, I think in the late 1920s. Really nice portrait. I think Williams is kind of overlooked as a portrait artist, but there's some really beautiful examples of her work. Paul Henry would be one of the better known, I suppose, painters who was really emerging into the kind of Irish art world at this time. He exhibited Spring in Wicklow. Many of Henry's works can be traced because of S.P. Kennedy's catalogue raisonné. There was also Mary Swansea exhibited a work called In the South, which your guess is as good as mine as to what that might be. You also have works by Théophile Nicolet, who is really interesting. He was a Belgian artist who had connections to Ireland through Kathleen Fox. So you do get these little circles of influence that kind of come out. Paul Henry, Lily Williams, these were very much the more representational artists, but you also have works by Mamie Jellett and Evie Hone. So these are representative examples based on date. I don't know the exact works that they showed, but what's important is that these were shown at the New Irish Salon before their Society of Dublin Painters exhibition in 1923, which is often what's said to be the first time their works were shown, and obviously the reviews were so explosive for that, but actually their works had been shown earlier in the year in 1923. Now I've meant to change the slide, so I'll just skip on and come back. You also have some international works, and again, these are just representative. Michel Sevier, who's kind of a French/English artist, and the Russian-born but Paris-based Osip Zadkine. So, I mean, that change in style, these high modernist artists, and then the more traditional artists, it was a mix of everything all on the wall at once. This is just to show you the difficulty in tracing some of these works. So you can see on the top, it's just this long list. So there is Mamie Jellett, Evie Hone, and I think they're just down as abstract or colour work. And then you also have in the 1924 exhibition many works by Albert Glees. I think these were probably arranged to come to Dublin through Jellett or Hone, but as you can see, it just says gouache and pencil drawing. So who knows what they were. By 1924, when the works of these artists would have been shown, you get, I think, after the Jellett Hone exhibition, a more kind of interesting response in the press. So the Irish Times again say, for those who are curious to see some of the queer things that are being done nowadays under the name of art, there are some strange arrangements of angular patches of colour for which it is difficult to see any reason, and some other curiosities for which, although they are not according to the ordinary canons of picture making, there may be something to say. So very muted response to these modernist artists. A more favourable review came from Thomas Bodkin, writing in the studio, who notes again that these were 200 pictures by Irish, English and French artists. So just to illustrate some of the other exhibiting artists, you have works by Augustus John, C.R.W. Nevinson, George Clausen, and Edward Montgomery O'Rourke Dickey as well. One thing that, all press is good press, I think, and Crompton Walker very much leaned into that. So one of the works by Michel Sevier was a nude, and there was kind of an incident where someone made a complaint about there being a nude in it, because the hall was used for dances at night, and they said, if these young people are in dancing and there's a nude on the wall, who knows what's going to happen. But I think it might be a little... things were fluffed up, I think, as well, just to bring a bit of attention to the exhibition, because one journalist wrote, if you're in any doubt of a statue or a picture's success, you must have it banned. If you cannot have it banned, you must at all costs have it talked about. Walker probably invited these English and French artists to exhibit through the network of artist societies that went across Ireland and Britain. Many of the artists would have contributed to the Fine Arts Society or to the New English Art Club as well. We also have, when we look through the exhibitors, a real presence of artists connected with Cornwall, and particularly the Newlyn School and the Artist Colony at St Ives. Crampton Walker had spent a little bit of time himself in Newlyn, but they would have been very familiar through, again, these exhibition societies, through publications like The Studio, and there is a real kind of sympathy between many artists working in Ireland and these artist colonies. So this was one of the more, I suppose, impressive works that would have been exhibited in the New Irish Salon in the Old World Valley by Samuel John Lamorna Birch. Perhaps not someone you're familiar with, but he had initially worked with the Newlyn colony before establishing his own circle of artists at a town nearby called Lamorna, and then he added the name of the area to his own name to distinguish himself from another artist called Samuel Birch. Really beautiful colouring. This is a view down towards the sea. You can just see the sea peeking out in the background. Another artist who exhibited was Albert Julius Olsen. He was a London-born artist from a Swedish family, known for his work in St Ives and for his kind of maritime scenes as well. Interestingly, in 1925, Olsen had married an Irish woman, Edith Ellison, who was the daughter of an Irish horse breeder, and he spent a lot of time in Ireland. Again, these are just kind of representative of his work. And we know during World War II, when his studio was bombed, he left London in 1940 and then died in Dalkey in 1942. And he's an artist that I certainly had never come across, and I think there's a lot more to discover there about his time in Ireland. And just one more of the kind of Newlyn schools is Alice Fanner. She was a student of Olsen's. She studied at the Slade. And then went to Newlyn and spent a lot of time there. So yeah, lots I think to think about there in terms of the artists that are being invited over and what they might have known about Ireland. You also have, I'll stay on that for a moment, a number of artists from Northern Ireland, and I think Crampton Walker made a real effort to include these artists. So Mabel Ainsley, James Humbert Craig, and O'Rourke Dickey as well. And I'm going to come back to that in a little bit later to just illustrate some of their works. So in 1925, you have 300 pictures by 130 artists. And Grace Henry was among those who exhibited, and her work was really picked out for praise in the press. So she exhibited Girl in White, so maybe the Girl in White from the Hugh Lane collection. And this was the kind of colouring and the decorative kind of nature of it. She also exhibited primroses, and perhaps this version of primroses here. In the same year, you have a lot of prints in 1925. So Estella Solomon's really representing the kind of Irish etching school, etching revival, alongside works by Mabel Ainsley. Ainsley is a really interesting wood engraver, born in London but very much connected with Castlewellan Castle in the north. She spent a lot of time there, had a studio in Belfast for a number of years, and was a member of the Society of Wood Engravers. These are two examples from the Aberdeen Art Gallery. The Ulster Museum also have a collection of them. Really beautiful wood engravings. You also had, again, English and American etchings by Nevinson and by Whistler as well. One of the more whimsical things, I'm sorry this is such a grainy picture, but an English artist, Kitty Evershed, showed her paper figures. So these were probably quite ephemeral, small things. I don't know if there's any examples still extant, but little dancing figures that I suppose roved around the exhibition galleries. So in 1926, Crampton Walker begins to kind of expand how he's promoting Irish art, and he produces a book published by the Talbot Press called Irish Life and Landscape. He's very, I suppose, complimentary to himself in the introduction. He says, in Dublin during the past few years, there has been a decided increase in the number of exhibitions, among which have been those of the Royal Hibernian Academy, the New Irish Salon, the Dublin Painters, the Dublin Sketching Club, and the Watercolour Society. And that should be not to mention those of individual artists. And what's great about this publication is that it shows us and tells us a little bit more about some of the maybe less familiar artists who were part of the New Irish Salon. So again, I'm sorry these are kind of hard to see, but if you ever can get your hands on a copy of the book, they have it in the National Library and in other collections as well. But we have, for example, again, Mabel Ainsley. Here, one of her paintings of council cottages. Hans Eiten, a German born but based in Ireland. So each page gave a kind of short description of the artist and their work, and then reproduced very high quality for 1927 publication, really good colour illustrations, and then with the reproduction of the artist's signature under them as well. Just a couple of other artists who maybe certainly two weren't familiar to me. Theo J. Gracie, again a Belfast artist, and I've kind of picked out the northern ones here. O'Rourke Dickey, again painter, wood engraver from Belfast. And Horace Rendell Wood, a completely new name to me. He was born in Plymouth, active in St Ives and Newlyn, but then came and lived in Belfast, where he was the manager of the Pollock Gallery and also the honorary secretary of the Ulster Arts Club as well. I've never come across his work, and I'd be really curious if anyone has. You can see from the advertisements how Crampton Walker kind of funded this, and how the artists who were illustrated must have kind of taken out an advertisement to help with the production costs. So you can see there an ad for Kitty Evershed with one of her paper dolls. Mac, Mac is a really interesting caricaturist, incredible caricaturist of showing kind of the literary revival circle, but she's kind of promoting her paper flowers. And then Mr. and Mrs. E.L. Lawrenson, a married couple, Edward Lawrenson from Dublin and his wife Charlotte, who set up a studio in Surrey and produced some really interesting work through this period. So lots to follow up there. This is one of Charlotte Lawrenson's paintings. So this was reproduced in Irish Life and Landscape as an Irish peasant girl knitting. And now it's in the Brighton and Hove museums as girl knitting from 1925. So I think there's probably many works out there who have this kind of provenance of being connected with the New Irish Salon, and it has just all disappeared and kind of fragmented over the years. So the exhibition kind of keeps going, but after really 1926, it starts to peter out a little bit, and Walker gets pulled in different directions as well. So we see in 1927 a little bit more of a muted reaction in the press, though Bodkin again writes quite a longish account for the Studio magazine and reproduces Leo Whelan's interior or at the kitchen window, untraced this exact one, but very much part of his series of works showing kind of domestic interiors. Crampton Walker, as I say, starts to get pulled away from the New Irish Salon. He runs two exhibitions of Irish art in London in 1927 and 1928. One, the catalogue of an exhibition of Irish artists, that one is all artists who were involved in the New Irish Salon. And then the 1928 exhibition is works by himself, by Edward Lawrenson, Paul Henry and James Humbert Craig as well. And there's lots more to be learned about these exhibitions. By 1928, really, this is the last New Irish Salon, and it gets very little reaction in the press. But one of the standout works was William John Leach's The Cigarette. I think probably this version of it that's now in the Hugh Lane. But then when we come to 1929, there was no announcement that it was ending, that it was closing. It just disappears. But in 1929, that should say 1929, not 1919, the Fine Arts Society have an exhibition of etching, so British etching artists come and exhibit, and I think there must have been an involvement from Crampton Walker there, perhaps an exchange exhibition for the Irish art shows that he had organised in London. So, was it successful, the New Irish Salon? Well, it's very hard to tell. In 1940, Crampton Walker wrote a letter to the Irish Times saying that at several of the New Irish Salon exhibitions, the sales amounted to over £500, which I think for the time is quite a considerable amount of money. On 2 occasions, works were purchased for the Crawford Art Gallery through the Gibson Fund Committee. Michael Waldron down in the Crawford was really helpful with giving me access to the minute books for these. So basically the fund would have kind of figures going to all of the exhibitions and selecting works and then recommending them for purchase. So in 1925 they purchased this work, Phlox by Herved David Richter, a British painter. That was purchased for £30. They purchased in 1926 2 additional works, a landscape by Paul Henry, which was purchased for £52 and 10 shillings, which seems like quite a good deal, I would say. And then also a watercolour by Lamorna Birch for £22, The Valley of Pembreth. So that's a really interesting legacy of the New Irish Salon exhibitions is these selections. Also later, Leo Whelan's The Kitchen Window, so again one of his really beautiful domestic interiors, was recommended for purchase from the New Irish Salon in 1927, but actually didn't come into the collection until later that year after it had been exhibited elsewhere. It's also possible that works from the New Irish Salon are now in the Hugh Lane. Some were donated by Crampton Walker himself. So a Lawrenson etching of Gordale Scar and Gerard DeWitt's Troops Entering Cambrai. They were both donated by Crampton Walker in 1925. And in 1927, Lawrenson donated this work, Ploughing on the Sussex Downs as well. So I don't know exactly, but there's obviously a connection there between Walker, the Hugh Lane and artists from that exhibited with the New Irish Salon. The closing of the New Irish Salon did not spell the end of Crampton Walker's career, although he died relatively young in 1942, but through the 1930s remained active as an artist and as an organiser. So in 1929 and 1931 he organises exhibitions of landscape and flower painting at the Mills Hall, and in 1930 he works with Dermot O'Brien and others to organise an exhibition of Irish art at the Musée Royal de Beaux-Arts de Belgique, the Royal Museums in Belgium, a collection of 331 paintings, sculptures, enamels and lacework, which included many artists from the New Irish Salon. And the museum purchased this, Mimulus, by Crampton Walker for their collection. And it's lovely, in the catalogue introduction, Thomas Bodkin describes Crampton Walker as the tireless secretary of the Irish Organising Committee, to whose fruitful labour we owe the success of our undertaking. And you know, when we think of exhibitions of Irish art abroad, we tend to think more of the earlier shows, maybe the Hugh Lane Guildhall exhibition in 1904 or the 1922 Paris exhibition, but these continued through the 1930s as well. So Walker really made a considerable impact on artistic life in Ireland as a curator, an organiser and as an artist. And over the course of its 6 iterations, the New Irish Salon had offered a very broad church for contemporary visual art, placing Irish, British and European art side by side. And through then Irish Life and Landscape and the 2 London exhibitions, Crampton Walker had done so much to show Irish art of the 1920s to audiences outside of the island. So thank you very much.